Kumlan and Ablat Gemara. We are up to today, Daf Mem Ches Amud Aleph. We'll begin from the Mishnah. So continuing talking about the entire Sukkahs, including Shemini Atzeres. Halal, the mitzvah of saying Halal on Sukkahs, and the HaSimcha, the mitzvah of Simcha. Simcha is the Karbanas they brought Shalmei Simcha, the Shlamim, which is Ein Simcha Ela B'Basa. Is Shmeina, extends throughout the entire Sukkahs, including Shemini Atzeres. Ketzad, what do you mean? Melamed, that teaches us Shechayiv Adam, a person who's obligated b'halal, saying halal, and to say the entire halal, and Simcha, to bring Karbanas Simcha, covered Yom HaAchron Shel Chag, Kishar Karmeis Chag, and to honor and what do you call it, the Shemini Atzeres, just like any other day of Yom Tov. Says the Gemara, first of all, Menahan immediately, how do you know that Shemini Atzeres Chai b'Simcha? Truth of the matter is, we already had it elsewhere. By Pesach, it doesn't mention Simcha at all. Shavuos, it mentions Simcha once, and by Sukkot, it mentions 3 times. And we learn that we equate Pesach to Sukkot, that you need Simcha. But how do you know that Shemini Atzeres, which is a separate Yom Tov, it's only one day, how do you know there's a mitzvah of Simcha there as well? Says the Gemara, Torah, when we learn it, says the pasuk, "V'hayisa ach sameach," you should only be happy. It says in the pasuk, 7 days you should be tochad v'Hashem Elokecha, and then it says, "V'hayisa ach sameach." So what are you repeating that again? So we're saying is, tell you the rabbis leile Yom Tov Achim, after the Shivas Yomim, the following night. Also, you have to be b'simcha. And once you know the following night you have to be simcha, we make a kal v'chomer that the mador by night that you chai b'simcha, night is tougher to the day, is because you can only bring the karbanos by day. So therefore, you definitely chai. How do you know you chai all the other nights? Because it says Shivas Yomim, and we learned before the Yomim means leilis as well, good night. Maybe it means the first night of Sukkot. Yisa Achsameach means the first night of Sukkot. And the reason why you want to say you part of the first night of Sukkot is because there's no mitzvah of Simcha when you cannot bring a korban. And since at night you cannot bring a korban, it's only added Yom Tov, and that Yom Tov is not Yom Tov yet. So maybe that's the chiddush of the pasuk, that there's a mitzvah of Simcha that night as well, and to tell you that there is Simcha even when there's no Zvicha. And you use chulin meat or something. It says ach comes the cholok, ach comes to separate, ach comes always to limit, and therefore we say that was coming to tell you that I want to add something that I wasn't included before in a special time. And therefore, what is that? That's the following night. Says the Gemara, Umare Is. I don't understand. Why did you see fit let rabbis leili Yom Tov Achron Kuchmi Atzeres Ulahaitzi leili Yom Tov to exclude the first day Yom Tov? I'll tell you why. Mar bani leili Yom Tov Achron sheyesh Simcha lefanav, because the 7 days prior there's a mitzvah of Simcha, so therefore it flows on. Umoitzi ani leili Yom Tov, if I exclude the first night, ain't Simcha lefanav, there's no Simcha before it. So and therefore we'll say ain't Simcha el b'shas zvicha. So the first night there's no mitzvah of Simcha. Actually, there's a machlokes in halacha whether there's a mitzvah of Simcha the first night or not. There's a beautiful pshat from Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon says, how do you tackle it for Ach that there should be mitzvah of Simcha? Only Shemini Atzeres. So he says as follows. The entire Sukkah, you have a whole range of mitzvahs. Besides the mitzvah of Simcha, you have the mitzvah of Sukkah, by day you have mitzvah of Lulav. So there's numerous mitzvahs that you have on the Sukkahs. Shemini Atzeres, what mitzvahs are there in Shemini Atzeres? Shemini Atzeres has no specific mitzvah, nothing. So therefore, what's the only mitzvah? It's Yom Tov. And what are you supposed to do Yom Tov b'simcha? And that's what the pasuk says. V'hayisa ach sameach. There's a Yom Tov that the only mitzvah you have is the mitzvah of simcha, and that's Shemini Atzeres, which follows Sukkot. So that's how we know that it's referring to Shemini Atzeres. Next Mishnah says Sukkah Shiva Keitzad. The mitzvah of Sukkah is for 7 days and then it's over. And we want to show that if you sit in the Sukkah afterwards, we don't want you to be over Baal Tosef. Sukkah Shiva Keitzad. Gom Mamalecho. You finished eating on the 7th day. We're talking like the throw. Don't completely dismantle your Sukkah because you still might need it if you want to eat on the 7th day. Take off all the night we learned before. That in the Sukkah you should bring all your beautiful dishes and cutlery and so on. remove them, and your bed, the linen, and all that, remove them. So the covered now Shmini, welcome in Shmini Atzeres. So you remove the kelim min hamincha l'mayla from the late afternoon. Mipnei covered Yom Tov ha'achar chag. You now have to show some covered in respect for the new Yom Tov that's coming in. Says the Gemara, "Ein lekelim lehoydid ma." What happens if you don't have anything to remove from the sukkah? How are you going to show that sukkah is over and respecting now Shmini Atzeres? Says the Gemara, "Ein lekelim el ki yishtamesh ma yishtamesh." What did you eat with till now? What happened? You have nowhere else to bring your kelim to. You have nowhere else to eat. You're going to have to eat in the sukkah on the last day Yom Tov. So you need your dishes there. What are you going to do to show that you're not over Bal Tosef and that you're respecting the Yom Tov Shmini Atzeres? It's not just a continuation of sukkahs. What you do is you open up in the sukkah 4 tvachim, an area of 4 tvachim of pasul schach, and makes it possible. Could have said an area of 3 tvachim of open space, but that won't be so noticeable. We want also from Maris Ayin, people should realize there's something wrong here. 4 tvachim is much more noticeable, much more manifest. Rabbi says, "Madlik boas and he says, light a candle. We learned before that in a small sukkah you shouldn't light a candle. We had different reasons. Taisa says there because it's dangerous, and Rashi says because it takes up room. And remember, it's a small sukkah. You have a minimum shear 7 tvachim, and if you have a candle there, you're occupying space. You've just lost some of the vital space that you require. So light a candle. This way you show that we don't need the mitzvah sukkah anymore. I'm sitting in the sukkah, but not because of the mitzvah sukkah. I'm sitting here because I'm nowhere else to eat. So please, no argument. Who depends for the people in Chutzlar. It depends on the people in Yisrael. Big machlek to show him how to learn pshat. But the Rosh says his pshat fits into Rashi as well, even though it doesn't really seem to fit so much in the words as others want to learn. But that's what the Rosh says. The Rosh says that what we're talking about here is in Eretz Yisrael. We're talking about Eretz Yisrael on Shmini Atzeres, and we're talking for Chutz La'aretz on Simchas Torah, not on Shmini Atzeres. So since Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah is not Yom Tov anymore, is not at all Yom Tov anymore, so therefore you can put a candle in, and that's good enough. You show that it's not Yom Tov. But, so then you can remove 4 tvachim of kosher schach, put in 4 tvachim of pasul schach. Who cares? It's not Yom Tov anymore. But if we're talking about Shmini Atzeres for Chutz La'aretz, or Shvi, right after Mincha for Eretz Yisrael, then you should leave, then don't remove schach because you still need a sukkah, but put a candle in showing that you're about to welcome in Shmini Atzeres. Others learn Pshat and Rashi, and it seems from the word of Rashi that in Chutz La'aretz on Shmini Atzeres, even though you have to sit in the sukkah, somehow or another you can use these answers. If you have nowhere else to put your kelim, you can put the candle in, or you can put the candle in. So even when you need a sukkah, and even though the sukkah is small, you can put a candle in on Shmini Atzeres, because anyway it's only a Chumra Rabbanan and so on. So therefore we're lenient. But other Mepharshim have a hard time understanding why should it be if you need to sit in the sukkah and it's a suffix, then why we allow you to put a candle in? You're losing space. If you have a large sukkah, putting a candle is nothing because you're allowed to put a candle in there. How are you showing respect for Shmini Atzeres? You bring in there your food, your dishes after you finish eating. Dishes after you finish eating, which is not nice, is bar metal. Leave them outside. Dishes you should leave outside the sukkah. But the cups and glassware that you can leave in the sukkah. You can leave it in metal. Leave them in the sukkah. So the Mishnah, right to the next Mishnah. We discussed another mitzvah to do with sukkahs is nisach hamayim. Every single day when they brought the carbon tamid, they used to pour wine, but on sukkahs in the morning, tamid shel shachar, they used to also pour water. 2 different kainim had 2 different activities. One did the wine, one did the water, but according to most opinions, they did it simultaneously at the same time. And we had this whole discussion, the Gemara and others, that it could be the mitzvah of wine and the mitzvah of water is different. That the mitzvah of wine is a din in the carbon, the mitzvah of water is a din in the Yom Tov. It's not a din in the carbon, so it's 2 different mitzvahs. So therefore, it's not like you're joining mitzvahs together because it's separate and you have 2 different kainim doing it. Or others say that even if it's the same mitzvah, 2 different kainim doesn't make it chabilas, even though they're happening in tandem. So nisach hamayim ketzer. What exactly did they do when they poured the water? And it's only done in the morning service of the Tamid Shel Shachar. So he said, he had this golden jug, it contained, the size of it contained 3 lugim, the smallest libation, or The minimum libation they used was for a sheep, and for a sheep it was 3 lugin. It was 3 lugin. They used to fill it up from the Shalaya, from that's the water next to Yerushalayim, and that water was like spring water. And Higia l'Sharmayim. They would bring this water in the golden vessel. They bring it to the gate of Sharmayim, which is if you're standing facing the base of Mikdash on your left side and the south side. And then they came to Taku, Variu, Taku. They used to blow the shofar at Kia, true at Kia, a sign of Simcha. Then he walked into the base of Mikdash, and Ola Bakevish, remember the ramp of the Mizbeach was facing the south side. The Mizbeach was facing the north. We had an argument if it was directly opposite the entrance to the base of Mikdash, or a bit more to the north, a bit more to the south. But the ramp, which is 32 amos long, was on the south side. So when you came in from the Sharamayim, you came to the ramp. You came the ramp, normally when you went up and you want to do activity, you always had to go to the right. We learned before in Yuma, called Pinashat, but over here, you go due left, because you're going to be using the corner, the southwestern corner. So you're coming up the south side. To the right of you is the east, which is the entrance of the whole courtyard. To the left of you is the base of Mikdash. That's called the corner of Maravis Draimis, your southwest corner. And that is where you are going to pour these libations. So you make a left turn. So they're going all around, you make a left turn. We'll see later what. There were 2 vessels made out of silver that were there. Yehuda says, they're made out of plaster, out of lime. But why did they look like they looked a bit tarnished? Because of the wine, therefore they looked black, they looked like silver. Even though one vessel was water, one was wine, but we'll soon see in the Mishnah that if you mixed up and you poured the wine in the vessel for the water, it's also good enough. So therefore, they obviously used to make mistakes as well. So it became all blackened. Rabbi argued because he felt you're not allowed to have any metal in Mizbeach. It's not only a question of chiseling the stones in Mizbeach, but even just to have metal touching to Mizbeach is no good. So therefore, he had the different material together, made out of plastic. Tanakama says the issue of metal in Mizbeach is only to use the metal to carve out the stone, but not just touching it is not really an issue. Tais already asked an interesting question. How come you start out with gold and you go down to silver? We learned before, maybe we learned a while ago, that when it comes to the lechem hapanim, they start out putting it on a silver table, and then from there they've elevated made it into a golden one. And here you go another way down. You take it from gold and you bring it down to silver. So Tais answers, because these silver kalim were connected to the mizbeach, they were actually part of the mizbeach in a way. So therefore, it's no longer considered a keli. It's considered part of the permanent mizbeach. And the Mishnah continues, they had punctures, dakin. What does that mean? So the Nagbar Rashi tastes another Rishonim. Rashi holds there were 2 little pipes, 2 little like nostrils. Each keli had a nostril coming out with a puncture at the end. And therefore, when they put the wine in the keli, it came out, the way Rashi learns is it came out from the nostril there, and the water, the same thing, and it went onto the roof of the Mizbeach. And then it rolled over there until it came to the 2 chutes known as, and those 2 chutes, it went all the way down to the shisim. Taisus says, how in the world does Rashi know that's what happened? But Pashtas, there were 2 pipes directly from these vessels down to the shisim, to where the drain was, where they went out of the mizbeach, the chutes. So echad mu'u v'chadak. What the wine one? The wine one was much thicker, much wider hole. And the water one, this Harashlands, was a much narrower hole. In order for the water and the wine to pour out at the same time, so that both Kohanim did it at the same time, we want them to both leave the keli at the same time. So we had to make a bigger hole for the wine and a smaller hole for the water. Why it had to be bigger for the wine at the same? We'll soon see the Gemara. Okay. What do you call it? Ma'arava Shamayim, the keli on the west side, closer to the base of Mikdash, was the water, and Mizrachi, the keli on the east side, closer to the entrance to the courtyard, was of yain, was of wine. Either shamayim toshel, let's say mixed up and you pour the water in the wine keli, b'shal yain toshamayim, and you pour the wine in the water keli, yotza ya yaitza. Rabbi Yehuda argues on 2 points. First of all, he says it wasn't 3 lugim at all. He actually says belug hayemenasa koshmayna. It was only 1 lug. Number 1. Number 2 is it was 8 days. You said it was only sukkahs and not shmini atzeres. I say that also on shmini atzeres. We already had this yesterday in the Gemara that shmini atzeres a couple of things had in common with sukkahs. This is one of them. I want that you continued with the nisach hamayim. Well, the menasech to the one who was pouring, we tell him, Hag beyoda, lift your hand. Lift your hand. We want to see exactly what you are doing. And we want to see that you're pouring the water not on your foot, but directly into these vessels. Why? What happened? Because the Tzdukim didn't agree with the whole idea of Nisach HaMayim, because it's not written clearly in the Torah. You will learn that from the extra mem, yud mem, as we'll have in the beginning of our Tainus. Shepam echad, it once happened. Nosach echad agav aglav. One of the guys, they poured it on his foot. The rogmu kol on the esragim, and they stoned him with their esragim. They bombarded him with their esragim. Clearly, the esragim were not that expensive then. So this person there, this kohen went ahead. They didn't check him out properly, and he went ahead and he poured it on his foot because they didn't believe in Nisach HaMayim. So since then, they made a takana that you have to lift your hand. We want to see you pouring it directly into the safel, directly into this particular utensil, this vessel. They would do the same thing on Shabbos as well, but there's one difference. On Shabbos, they were not allowed to bring the water in, so they had to bring it from Friday. But we have a problem. Anything that's found in a keli by day, one day cannot remain in that keli overnight because it's lina, becomes possible by staying overnight if it's in a clay shodas. So what they did was they filled up a gold barrel. They made sure that this keli was not mekudesh at all. He was never prepared, never set aside to do any avodah for the Beis Hamikdash, so it was not a clay shodas. And they would then place it in a special chamber, and they would make sure that everything was covered and everything else. And nishpechu, what happened? What happened if they take the water? Somehow they got poured out. Or nisgausa, they left it open. And what's the problem that leaving it open? The problem is that a snake could have drank some of the water overnight. And what's the problem with that? Rashi says, interesting. The problem with that is, since you have to have an exact amount of water, if the snake drank some of it and replaced it with poison, with venom, you no longer have the shear. So it looks like the shear was exact, and now you no longer have the shear. Taisa doesn't like that at all. Taisa says the reason is because it's not pasig, it's not appropriate to use water with venom inside for such an activity of Nisach HaMayim. This gal say memalim in a kir, so they could no longer use spring water, so they went ahead and used water from the kir. There's actually machlek is the water that was in the kir. Did that come from a spring as well, meshalech, or any waters? So depending on that is to see whether is it particular that we had to have spring water when it came to Nisach HaMayim. Even though it says after mine besasa mimayne, it sounds like spring water, but the question is whether it's dafka pialoch or not. Shayayin v'hamayim megulim psulim mezbeach, wine or water that's left open overnight is possible mezbeach. Having more avodah zara because we're worried about the nachash, but today we say there's no nachashim around, so we're not really worried anymore. How do you know that you blow? First of all, how do you know blow shofar when we do this chamayim? When you draw the water, it has to be bisasim b'simcha. And what better way of making simcha than blowing these shofar? The Gemara has this extraordinary story here, and the Mefarshim have a hard time understanding what's the point of this whole story. But basically, Hanu Terei Mini, there were 2 apikarsim. Chad Shmei Sasan, one of them has a name called Sasan, and the Chad Shmei Simcha, and one of them had a name called Simcha. I'm better than you. They had an argument which name is more virtuous, Sasan or Simcha. So if I remember correctly, that some say that Sasan is external joy and Simcha is internal joy. And the question is, what's more important? That you should be happy or all those around you should be happy because of you? What's the main thrust or what's the main purpose? In fact, we have in Rashi and Chumash in this week's Pasha, Samachti v'simachti, that I was happy and I made everyone around me happy as well. So we see that's not sufficient just to be happy in your own. Real happiness is when all those, it's contagious. That's the true acid test to see whether you really enjoy. But that's a machlekes. Sasan or simcha. So you start talking on psukim. He said in pasuk sasan v'simcha yasigu. That sasan and simcha will reach you. So we see sasan was mentioned first. Amal simcha sasan. No, I'm better than you. Simcha v'sasan la Yehudim. They mentioned sasan and simcha to the Yidden. So So he simcha is first. Amalei sasan simcha chad yom sasan said the simcha. You know something? It'll come one day that shavkuch you're gonna be forsaken. They're gonna leave you alone. What do you mean they'll leave you alone? They're gonna They're gonna send you pravanka as a messenger, as a leader. You're gonna have to lead the people out. And you'll no longer be whoever you think you are, and you're going to have to lead the people out. It says, "Kiva simcha," they're going to use simcha to take the Eden out. You're going to lose your position. One day they'll leave you. One day they're going to take you and they're going to use you as a canteen to fill you up with water. So you'll be reduced to sachak, to being a vessel. So there's a case, no, you guys will need me. It says, just don't think because they don't, the minim don't believe in Chisa Mason. And you're saying that according to you guys with Chisa Mason, you should know ultimately it's all about me. Because you guys are going to be filling me with water. So he said, back then, that we're going to give water to Sasan. You know what it means? You're not getting up with Chisa Mason. So all we're going to have left from you is your hide, your skin. So the skin said, I think you hide your skin. So your skin, we're going to turn into a canteen. That's the only purpose you're going to have because you're not joining us for Tchias HaMason. So you will use your skin for what it is. All of a Kaddish. When you go to the left, when you go to Mizbeach, on the ramp, you always make a right turn. And you surround them around Mizbeach. It's a long way. Remember, it's 32 amos long, and by the time you get to the top, it's less than 32. It's 28. It's 28 or 26. We had yesterday talked about an argument 2 days ago, but nevertheless, and you got to walk all around. So it's 100 amos minimum. The following 3 things, you go make a straight left turn. If you go to the left and then you walk backwards. When it comes to pouring the wine and pouring the water, we don't want you to go to right. And we learned that on generally you make it on the east, on the southeast corner, which will be in your right. But if there's too many, then you make the view on the southwest corner. We don't want you to walk around the entire Mizbeach to get to the southwest corner, because we are scared that the smoke that's coming from Mizbeach will either taint the water of the wine, will have a smell, or this color, and the bird might choke from all that smoke. So therefore, you go straight to the left, and then you step backwards. Why do you step backwards? So Rashi says, because we don't want you to walk such a long area. Taisus finds that hard to understand because there's a long. So generally, you walk all around the back to the right. That's walking a lot of extra steps that no need for it. So because if that's the case, then any activity you do, as soon as you go to the right, that corner there, the southeast corner, you should then walk back. Back to the ramp. Why do you have to walk all around if we're so worried about people walking extra space, extra distance? He said the reason is because you always have to walk to the right. Once you finish your activity on the southwest corner, if you're stepping backwards and going back to the ramp, you're actually walking to your right. That's why you do that. Elisha Mashchidin, Abhuda says that it wasn't made out of silver, but rather it was just for the water and the wine made of black. I understand how the bim became black from the wine. I understand. Oh, but the Maya, the vessel that was dedicated for water, how did that get black? Says we learned. You can make it, if you mix it up, it's all right. Then so therefore it's possible that you poured wine in the water thing, and that's why it became black. Two nostril. Now, what do you tell me? That the hole for the wine was much wider than the water. They should both come out at the same time. Now, why would you need it wider? Unless you poured more wine, you put more wine in than the water. So it seemed, what do you mean? It seems that Yehuda is right. Yehuda said when it came to the water, when it came to wine, you have to have 3 lugin. When it came to the water, only 1 lug. So obviously, how can 1 lug and 3 lugin, both of them pass out of the keli the same way, same time? So therefore, you made a much wider hole, 3 times larger than the hole of the water, and therefore the wine escaped much 3 times quicker than the water, and they both finished at the same time. Isn't that pshat? Says the Gemara, Lema Maslisin Rabbi Yehudi, Rabbi Rabban. Our Mishnah seems to follow Rabbi Yehuda. It's not Rabbi Yehuda. Oimer belug hayemenase koshmeina. They use 1 lug. V'li Rabban and if Rabban kehadodininu. It was if the Rabban hold both of them at 3 lugin. Why would you have to have one hole wider than the other? Says the Gemara, no. No proof. Afilu tema rabbanon. Even the rabbanon who hold that the wine and the water, both three lugin, wine passes out much slower than water because it's thicker. Chamra samich. Chamra is very thick and sticky. And maya colors, and water is very liquidy and it passes out right out. So therefore, the wine needs a much bigger hole to be able to escape. And at the same time, it takes for the same amount of water to escape. Talking about makes sense. Either the roch of the kotzer is you need a much greater difference of, and dak is not as, the disparity is not as great as kotzer v'rochav. And according to you, if it's 3 versus 1, 3 lugit versus 1 lugit, you're in a much wider hole, 3 times larger than the other one. Tanya B'nai says, he says, Shnei kashvoid hayu. There were 2 kalim. The echad shamayim v'echad one from water, one from wine. Shayayin pirach. And not in that, and in his expression, he himself doesn't even use those words. He says the wine was much wider, and shamaya pirkatza much shorter. They call them bas achas. So first of all, the wording is different. Instead of other daka, we use rachav and kotzer. Plus, the meaning is different. Rachav and kotzer are the contrast is much greater than of and dak. And if it's 3 times more water than 3 times more wine than the water, then you need a much greater hole for the wine. What we learned. But they would tell him, lift your hand. There was a story of Duki that he poured the water on his foot. Again, they stoned him, they battered him with their esregim. And on that day, one of the rocks got chipped through the, and Rashi says, they actually threw stones. Even though the Mishnah said they threw esregim, Rashi says they threw stones, and the Medrash says they actually killed this Duki. More so. And some want to say that this Duki was Yaneh HaMelech, because he was a Kohen, but here it says that he was killed. And they ask how Rashi knows that it was stones, because I guess Rashi is saying esregim, there's no way that esregim can chip the stones of the Mizbech, so they have to use something else as well. So they use stones. Anyway, so now you had a problem because there's a defect in the Mizbech, and the stones have to be whole. They brought a fistful of salt, and they sealed it up. Not that this is a good substitute. There's also appearances. We didn't want that it should appear as covered of the base of Mikdash. It shouldn't appear that it's there's a there's some kind of a defect. Any mizbech doesn't have the following things is possible. If it doesn't have the ramp, and you had this long ramp that was 32 hours long, and then you had these short ramps. In other words, when you went to the ramp took you all the way up to the mizbech, the little gap in between. And then there were 2, but if you wanted to go to the Seivev, that was the 5 amas height. So there was a ramp, a shorter ramp that was going from the main ramp, the right and left, to the mizbech. So if you don't have these ramps, it is possible. The loy keren, if it's missing the 4 corners, the loy yisayid is missing. We learned a few days ago that there was a yisayid, a base platform that was 1 amma high, 1 amma in, and the loy debu had to be square. It's possible avoided. It's possible avoided. Af haseviv. Also essential is the seviv itself. Chaim Gutnik is told by the hesped of Moshe Feinstein, told a beautiful story. He said that he once went to visit Moshe Feinstein, and he asked him, why is it that the Lubavitcher Rebbe campaigned so strongly against, and you too, you support him, against having committees where Orthodox rabbis and Reform rabbis sit in the same committee, and they're having debates and the discussions about Yiddishkeit. You both paskin that you're not allowed to be in those committees. Why is that? All over Shas we find that we had menachas, we had places that the Amoraim or the Tanaim would have discussions, the Bichem Bezaki would have discussions with the Tukim and the Baisusim. They were reform. So Moshe said, if you look in the Gemara we just learned right now, it says that this Tuki went ahead and poured the water over his foot. So what was the reaction of the average person in the street? Immediately took the Esrogim, no questions asked, doesn't matter what the price, and they bombarded this person with Esrogim because they felt you're challenging our Yiddishkeit. So the Moshe says, when the populace understands the difference between a tzduki and a rav, and they themselves are confronted by the behavior of tzdukim, and they bombard them with Esrogim, then the Rabbanim not only have the right, but they should engage with these apokryphim and hopefully convince them of the error of their ways. But he says, we live today in a time when if the people don't understand, the average person doesn't understand a rabbi, what's the difference? You're Reformed, conservative, Orthodox, we're all rabbis, there's different opinions. And so people are not throwing a sregim on the Reform rabbis. Then it's the duty of the rabbanim to be the ones throwing the sregim, to make sure everybody understands the difference. Anyone have a good day?